What's going on, everybody? I'm Logan, the 64th Gear Jammer Skeele, and I'm opening up the doors on another episode of Toy Talk. What would you do if you had a huge tractor and that every time you stopped in front of your barn, the hood slid right off and landed in front of the barn? No joke. I knew a couple that had just that tractor. And I'm going to relate that story to you. But first, I got to tell you a backstory. It all started in 1914 when Farmer John, yes, that was his real name. Well, John, he had a bright idea. He wanted to power all four wheels on his four-wheeled tractor. Now, three-wheeled tractors, they were dominant, and four-wheeled tractors were just becoming popular. And you see, John, he wanted to power all four of those wheels. So he finally figured it out. And the Fitch four-drive tractor was brought to life. Yes, sir, John did it. He created the first true four-wheel drive tractor using gears instead of chains. John H. Fitch of Mason County, Michigan, that was his name, and his company demonstrated his invention in 1918. This was at the National Tractor Demonstration held in Salina, Kansas. During the demonstration, a four-drive tractor pulled a four-bottom plow nonstop for 88 hours, tilling a total of 100 acres. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of acreage by today's standards, but boy, back in 1918, it sure was a whole lot. John Fitch's tractor was a success, and his company built over 2,000 of these tractors. Now, I found this part of the story interesting. How many of you guys have ever heard of the Fitch four-drive tractor? You never know where storytelling will lead. I guess another landmark manufacturer of four-wheel drive tractors was Massey-Harris. If you were in sales, did you ever try to sell a totally new concept or a new product to anyone? Difficult to say the least. Well, attempts to persuade farmers to switch from standard two-wheel drive models over to the new four-wheel drive models, well, that was a challenge. It could be done, but in the 1930s and during the Great Depression, well, that was another story altogether. The general purpose four-wheel drive tractor was announced in 1930 by Canadian manufacturer Massey-Harris, and it proved to be a very hard sell. You see, Massey-Harris was the first major manufacturer to offer a real gear drive, four-wheel drive tractor. The Massey-Harris general purpose was said to be the result of a long research and development program. Well, I wonder about that because they skipped a few key important ingredients. The GP, it had difficulty in turning. It could go straight real good, but turning, well, something was missing there. The GP had plenty of power for pulling. It had good gears and large diameter steel wheels. But the GP was a new concept in tractors. Sales were disappointing, and after a few short years, production ended in 1936. Besides being new, I think the difficulty in turning the GP in the field was leading to its unpopularity. Advancement in four-wheel drive tractors was now stalled. Track layers and two-wheel drive tractors, they were popular for the next 20 years. Well, actually a lot longer than that. Of course, World War II was raging at the time. Now, after the war, American and Canadian farmers, they were demanding more power and better traction from the tractors. The tractor manufacturers, though, they were reluctant to oblige them, and something, or someone I should say, just had to fill the need. The story goes like this. Two brothers stepped up to fill the need. They had a family farm, and the brothers wanted more power from their tractors. They couldn't find any ready-built tractors, though, that would fill the need. So from 1957 to 1958, they built one. Simple way to solve a problem and fill that need. Build it yourself, right? Little did they know the work that they had got themselves into. Their friends and their neighbors saw it, and they wanted one too. Funny how that works. Build something remarkable, and everybody wants one. Before they knew it, they were making Steiger four-wheel drive tractors. I could go on and tell you about the Versatile factory that began production in 1966, or about Big Bud in America. And I could even talk about Waltana that began building high horsepower four-wheel drive tractors in Australia in about 1975. They all made huge four-wheel drive tractors before the major manufacturers caught on. But I want to get back to my main story here. Let's see now. Where was I? Oh yeah, it was about the couple that had a huge tractor that the engine hood flew off every time they stopped in the barnyard. It's funny, you'd think a brand new machine wouldn't have major problems. Well, my friends who bought a 1979 brand new International 3588 tractor were shocked to find that it had one major issue. They took a chance on an all-new concept in farm tractors that IH had built to satisfy farmers wanting four-wheel drive row crop tractors. Now, they told me the story of getting their brand new toy delivered to their farm, and I'm going to go on and tell it to you right now. It was a cool spring day, just before plowing was to begin, on their small farm in southern Indiana. Anxiously awaiting the arrival of their purchase, the usual buyer's remorse feelings were going on. In the husband's mind, he was thinking, did I buy the right tractor? Did I make that right choice? You know, those are the feelings that we all get when we drop $50,000 on a machine. In drove the dealer's truck, carrying this radical new tractor, and James ran out to greet it. His wife Susan followed shortly after. She had to clean up the kitchen, but she wanted to see their brand new baby too. It was beautiful sitting on the lowboy. The truck driver handed James the paperwork, and he set about unchaining the tractor so he could get it unloaded. One thing about IH, that red and white paint scheme really stood out. And to Susan and James, it was the prettiest thing they'd ever seen, all washed and detailed. The trucker, he finished unchaining and climbed up in the cab to drive the tractor off the lowboy. As it rolled out, he could tell that James and Susan were on cloud 9. James looked over at Susan and said, "Yep, we made the right choice." Susan had to agree with him. The trucker, he drove it over in front of their barn, and then he climbed down to get the signed paperwork from James. And James went on and handed it to him. And then that's when the trucker went about picking up his chains and storing them on his truck so he could get on his way. It may have been a little early for plowing this year, but it didn't matter to James. He wanted to try out his new toy. Well, you know how it is. When you get a new vehicle, a tractor or a truck, you want to go try it out too, don't you? Once the truck had gone, James climbed on up in the tractor and went to hook up his plow. This turned into a new experience as he turned the tractor like he normally would to hitch up, but the hitch went the other direction. The dealer, having never sold one of these 2+2s before, he didn't mention that these tractors behave different than normal row crops or even articulated tractors. Now puzzled, James was trying to learn how to maneuver this tractor, and finally he figured it out after about 20 minutes of frustration and cursing his decision to buy the monster he couldn't tame. Susan was laughing at him and trying to help, but probably didn't help make it any easier to hitch up the plow. But anyway, he got it all hooked up, and Susan then went and climbed up into the cab, and off to the field they went. The tractor, it rode smoothly across the farm to the field, where they dropped the plow down and started plowing. The tractor started to work, but it was no real strain in the loamy soil, and James plowed on till lunchtime. About then, Susan had to get to work, so they headed back to the barnyard at a pretty good clip. Now this tractor was a little bit faster than James's old tractor. James was happy with his new tractor because it had worked out better than he had expected and way better than he'd hoped for. Susan was happy it all worked out too, but she was a little bit worried about how much they'd spent on this tractor, and they'd hoped for a good crop in order to cover it. As James rolled up to the barn, he was running a little bit faster than he normally would have in his old tractor. Then it occurred to him that he'd better stop a little bit harder than had he been in his old tractor. Just when he slammed on the brakes, his new tractor stopped pretty dang good, but the hood didn't. James and Susan, they just dropped their mouths and said, "What?" as they watched the hood of their brand new tractor slide right off the front and land on the ground with a thud. Now they was understandably mad at this new machine breaking. I think I would be too. James, he went into the house and he called up the dealership to yell at the salesman. That salesman, though, he didn't believe James, so he came out to the farm to see for himself. James was the first farmer to order one of these new style row crop four-wheel drives, so they didn't have much knowledge of them and their quirks back at the dealership. Once the salesman got to the farm, he stood there in total amazement at the hood sitting on the ground in front of the tractor. Thank goodness for the warranty, though, as the salesman called the shop, and they sent out a mechanic who also stared in disbelief before going to work and putting the hood back on the tractor. The latch failed to hold the hood due to the hood's weight, and the momentum of the hood when it started sliding, it just sheared the pins off when they hit the stops, sending that hood right off the front, landing on the ground in front of the tractor. James, though, he was not unhappy with his purchase, as it did the job much better than any tractor he had ever used before. So it was back to the field, and James remembered not to slam on the brakes too hard, and he was happy again, till one day he forgot and he slammed on the brakes, and you can guess where that hood landed. More muttering, and the dealer come out and fixed it. This time, though, he had an international recall repair. 2 new side-mounted hood latches were installed instead of the automotive-style cable latch that simply just couldn't hold the weight of that hood. After that, James had no more issues with the tractor, and as far as I know, he is still farming with it today, over 40 years later. The 2+2 had several versions and were popular among row crop farmers. First produced in 1979, well, it was introduced in 1978, but produced in 1979. The 2+2 went through 3 generations before being discontinued in 1984, and a 4th generation was on the drawing board. The rapid replacement of models was an attempt for IH to compensate for design flaws in the 2+2s. And it was also a tactic to capitalize on the tractor's popularity. This crossover tractor offered row crop farmers the best of both worlds, a 4-wheel drive that readily could negotiate row crop fields. On November 26, 1984, Tenneco, they bought out IHC's Ag Division, merging it with their machinery firm, Case. Shortly after the merger, Case IH decided to end production of all IH tractors over 80 horsepower, which ended the 2+2 line. Such a shame. In its place, Case IH would develop the Magnum line of tractors, a very popular line, and incidentally, there was a prototype 2+2 Magnum in there. Anyway, for the nitty-gritty details on the international 2+2s, like model numbers and horsepower and years of production, click the link in the description below to grab the copy of the 2+2 stats down there. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'd really appreciate it if you join my YouTube family. It's very easy to do and it costs absolutely nothing. Just click the subscribe button and ring the bell next to it. Also, go on and hit that thumbs up button to let YouTube know that you enjoyed this video. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Also down there, there's a share button. Go on and share this video with your friends on your social media because I'm sure they'll enjoy it too. Thanks for watching this video. I'm Logan, the 64th Gear Jammer Skeele, and I'm closing up the shop doors on another episode of Toy Talk.